Hello everyone, hi again. Thank you for coming in these huge, enormous numbers. I think some people have called it a day or just called it a coffee and are coming back very, very soon. We are going to be listening to our last speaker on this stage for today. We just had a quick chat and he told me he's been in Belgrade quite many times already and in Serbia, so some of you probably know him already quite extensively. His name is PETRI. HEIRAMO.
Very well said. Thank you. Hello.
So Petri, you come to us from Finland,
Yes,
right?
correct.
And I understand you lead an extremely eventful life.
In what way?
You know,
I don't feel that way at all.
you have a teenage person in the household.
Well, 16, 8, and 2, so that's going to be a lot of life every single day.
Well, it's one adult child or three small kids, right?
Sorry?
It's one adult if you calculate all their years together, or, three kids still.
I mean, anyone who has had children or has children, hopefully they're still alive. I mean, that's the greatest joy is that, it's a lot of work, but the pleasures are just something you can't get any other way.
Okay, good. Thanks for explaining it to us. If you're thinking of children, think twice, perhaps, or do not think at all.
Now, this is not agile, but there is just the investment you have to put in is just absolutely worth it. So if you doubt about having children, I recommend you go for it.
Okay, good to know. So you are going to help also our president improve the birth rate in our country. You might even get a small medal from him.
No, but I recommend people working on it.
Okay. Petri was actually surprised that I managed to pronounce his surname properly.
It's very well done.
But for people from this region, it's very easy.
That's one of the special things. I find Serbian language easy to pronounce because Finnish is pronounced the same way, and it goes vice versa. So that's nice. Anywhere else, it's the mangles that people do with my name. It's amazing. It's unbelievable.
And we also have in this country, or in this region, to be more precise, we have traditional folk song, which involves your name, which involves your surname. So in case, guys, you didn't know, it's Ramo, Ramo, druže moj. So, this is Ramo. This is the body from the song.
Thank you.
So, Petri. To continue the tradition, a long-standing tradition coming from this morning, you have a task for our audience. Apart from being attentive, making sure you ask the right questions, getting the answers, networking with other people. So, what is the special assignment? The guessing game. The guessing game.
In fact, I don't yet know the number. You have the paper, so you'll also tell me. But I tried to go back in time. So I've been coming 9 years. So it was almost exactly 9 years ago when I came in first time to run the first certified training for CSM here in Serbia. That was the first time I ever came to Serbia, so it was an entirely new experience to me. And I've been coming over quite a few times. So the question is, how many people have been in my certified trainings in these 9 years? Guess the number. And you'll tell me later as well,
So just to make sure we heard it all properly, how many people in this country, so not necessarily everyone from this country, but in the courses, trainings you have given here, in total have been certified by Ramo Ramo druže moj?
Yes.
Please.
All right, then, timers, coaching, facilitation. All right, so today's topic is a story of the world's most expensive Hello World. You know what Hello World is? It's an application that all it does is prints Hello World, right? So we spent quite a lot of time on the world's most expensive. Now, is it really the world's most expensive? I don't think there is conclusive data about the cost of various Hello World applications that people have done, but we spent quite a lot of time and money on this one. All right, so the specific moment I want to get you back to is a first sprint review. So this was in 2009 something, and we had these 7 people from the team. We had the Scrum Master, well, I was the Scrum Master coach. We had the product owner. We had worked 2 weeks plus another 2 weeks to get started, so before the first sprint, so 4 weeks altogether. And the team gave the product owner a post-it note with the HTTP address to a local server. And I said, just type it into a browser, see what happens. And all that showed up was a plain browser view with the string hello world at the top. And was like, yes! It was almost like cheering, because it was a very important moment. If this hello world hadn't appeared, we would have been in trouble. The story before this moment, this was a public sector project. We had sold a project to a customer in Finnish government. And it was sold actually as a Scrum Agile project because they wanted Scrum and Agile. When we sold it, we estimated 12 months of work, this and this much money. We thought we can use the technologies we prefer, technologies we have experience in. But when it started, this isn't the right time to tell your vendor or your consultants that, which is actually technology you want, but they did. Only at that point it came up that they wanted us to use Oracle's service, content management server and the database. Now, technically, there shouldn't be any reason why we couldn't use the products. It's an ODBC database. We've used ODBC databases a lot, so it should be okay to use the database. And the content management server logically is for this kind of products. So we should be able to use it too. But no one really had any confidence how difficult it is, what kind of surprises, how does it integrate to the Agile workflow? All these questions meant that essentially we didn't know if we can do this. And so we needed to find out. Instead of just speculating, we wanted to do what Agilists do, an experiment. We wanted to test if we can actually use it, instead of just speculating. So, Hello World seemed to be the simplest possible solution that gave us an answer to whether we can or cannot use these technologies the customer wants us to do. Now, often, something smaller than a hello world with the whole of architecture, database, all the installations, and essentially 2 weeks of work is often enough. But for us, it wasn't. We needed conclusive evidence because otherwise the customer would need to do some negotiation on their end with their IT, maybe stakeholders, so on. So we had to build all processes as well. Acceptance test driven, continuous integration, feasibility, prove basically that we can do it. And that's the hello world was relevant. So here's a list of various things that this hello world did. So all the tools we needed to do were installed. What else we had? Configuring, the servers, well, you can read the list. Everything. Processes, testing, automation, integrations, scripting, everything. It was a complete application in that domain, using the Oracle database and the content management server. It was a perfect application. All it did was hello world, of course. Now, certainly, we used user stories in the backlog, and the first story was actually very much like the one I wrote there. It was a full application, as I said. Fully tested, too. Yes, all you need. You don't need to test much to confirm that hello world shows up, but there was an automated test that was executed as part of the build that confirmed that the hello world shows up and passed the test and then deployed automatically to a QA environment. Now, this is a story that I share because I want to exemplify the stuff behind it. Why did we do this? Now, we commonly talk about value and value-driven, customer-driven development and how we focus on what we actually get out. And so we often focus our conversation about the business value, the customer value, the user value, the money, which is the ultimate reason why we build stuff, right? So that we benefit and create benefit to the people using the product. And, of course, to the organization building it in terms of monetary rewards and return on investment and so on. But then there's the other kind of value that this story, this Hello World exemplifies. It's the learning value. So whatever risk management, other things that we need to do, that will help us either save money or solve problems or prevent them, or possibly discover new values, new value streams or opportunities. Could be to manage risk, exploring alternatives, but also getting feedback so that we can make better decisions. So when we look at the project, I talk about project here because we had a project, but it also applies to releases or some major milestones that you do in a more product-like development. This learning value is often much more important in the very early sprints than actual production value is, but the product value has, the market value, because we are testing, like we did, architectural things, performance things, usability, possibly various things. So learning is more important, and I'm going to show you some concrete ways in which you can visualize it. It's a kind of a matter of confidence as well. If we are confident about the knowledge, the backlog, the things we need to do, the benefits, we don't need to explore. We just execute, we do planned delivery. The stuff that we do, it takes time, and we make larger commitments. We can have 2-week sprints just perfectly fine. We may make bigger customer commitments about certain feature sets that we're going to deliver. That's perfectly fine when we have the confidence about what we're doing. But when we don't have the confidence, then of course we want to explore. And that's when these stuff that I'm talking about come into play. Stuff is emergent. As we learn, we refine the things. We have fast cycle time, so we get small things done, we learn, we do more small stuff, and then, of course, the commitments in themselves are small. Should we use Kanban instead of Scrum? Not really. A lot of times, this work that we do interleaves or mixes in with more confident work. So we are exploring stuff coming up in the future. We have stories to do exploration while we are also doing development of the earlier stuff that we have already started that we do have a confidence in. So when I start, if I work with a team and we start a release, I often use something like this as a strategy to get the backlog up to date and to incorporate the learning into the backlog. So I start with analyzing the stories. We do write things down based on the speculation or specification that we have from a customer or from prior steps in the product process. And we look at a couple of things: criticality, value, and risk and uncertainty. We prioritize the backlog based on that information, a couple of things, and then we act on that information over the first few sprints. And I'm going to go into more detail of these steps in the next slides. So first of all, analysis. I start with 3 things, criticality being the first one. But I want to separate value and criticality. Criticality means, what if we can't do this? What is the size of consequences? And I divide into 4 categories. I use a version of Moscow. So must means it's a non-negotiable item. If we can't do it, we can't ship. Period. Non-negotiable, no workaround, no options. Now, it doesn't mean that if we talk about high-level backlog, many of the items are epics, high levels, big items, unclear. It doesn't mean that everything there is a must. But it means some part of that story, that epic, is a necessary component. Should is often product-wise equally important than musts are, but there's a workaround, or if we really have to, we could postpone it a little bit. But of course, if we have to postpone all the shoulds, then of course we don't have much of a product, it's not worth doing. So usually when we think of planned scope, we have musts and shoulds together, plus maybe a few of the coulds, which are clearly the optional items that we want, but items we still want to keep as part of the release and maybe decide later when we know more in detail how much time we have available for us, and how many of them we can actually do. And then, of course, won't is the category for things that we now already can make a decision not to do in this release. Maybe in the next one, who knows, maybe not. But their stuff still worth saving. So won't doesn't mean it's that it's an idea we're not going to do. It's an idea we want to do later, and we want to save it for future. Once we have that, we can look at value. So I will usually use poker chips and things like that so that I can get multiple people's perceptions independently of one another. So I use poker chips, relative valuation, and just to see which ones of the stories seem to attract a lot of chips. And of course, this is not precision, it's just a hunch. But of course, there's a difference between 1 and 15, right? You can probably quite well say the story with 15 is likely to be very much more valuable than the one with the 1. 0 doesn't mean no value, but not enough to register. And then the last aspect I look at is the uncertainty, the risk associated with each of these stories. That uncertainty, I like the word better than risk, because uncertainty is just a lack of knowledge, lack of confidence. Risk is often negative. Uncertainty may be positive as well. Anyway, so again, I divide the risk into 2, business risk and technical risk, because those have different impact on how we deal with them. Business risk is often things we have to do research on, or market analysis, or could be stakeholder stuff that we need to find out. The technical risk is internal to us. It's about, can we do this? Can we not? What do we not know about doing it? Right, so this gives us some foundation for prioritizing stories. It's not all the different aspects that matter in prioritization, but it's a good number of them. So then, once we have the data, a starting point, I usually teach something like this to the team and the PO, whoever are on that workshop, and ask them, which one of these 4 quadrants, if we take the risk and value first, which one of these quadrants is the most attractive one, the most important one for us to consider now? Is it low value, low risk, high value, low risk, or the other 2? Now usually, quite rightfully, people point out, does this work? Yeah, it does. They usually point out to the right side, because there's a high value. That's a pretty giveaway, right? So which one of those 2 is better or more important? Could be either, but it depends on a couple of things. First of all, is the story independent? Can we take the story and ship it independent of all the other stories? If yes, then the bottom right is the more important one, that one. Because let's get the value out, let's get it into production and benefit from that. But when we think of larger releases, larger goals, the stories tend to be interconnected, or that, in order to benefit the true value of the features, you need a set of features. So there are dependencies between the stories. And in those cases, this corner tends to be the one that we want to study most. So that's number 1. Whatever's there, we will need to deal with it the very first. It's not because of the value, though. It's because of the high risk and the importance of the story. Once we have confidence, we can do the stuff in the upper right corner. We can go to the second corner, just deliver the stuff, get the value out. And if we have time, we can, of course, do nice things, make things a little more user-friendly, or add some nice-to-have features, and then, of course, we ship. So that's sort of, you're going to see, that's sort of a mantra. Okay, let's come to the mantra. So I want to do this in order. So what about the high-risk, low-value ones? Don't do them, right? Don't. However, what if we have something that is a mandatory, a must item in this corner? We can't choose not to do it because that would prevent release. So therefore, of course, because of the high risk and the mandatoriness, not because of high value, but the mandatoriness, we of course have to deal with the musts. That kind of must in the first step. We want to confirm as early as possible that what we want to do is possible. But must doesn't mean do first. Because if we have a must in the bottom left corner, and we do have a lot of low value, low risk musts in many projects that we know how to do, we just need to do it. It's not important for a user, but it's mandatory from like identification of a user or something like that that we need for some of the other functionality. Those, we can do them whenever we want, as long as we don't do them the last. Because, if we do them very last, then of course that's asking for trouble, just in case something happens as we do it. Now, once we have an understanding about what is the priority and the order in which we want to do on the items, we apply the idea I use this kind of technique where I put columns on a board, table, say, okay, A means nothing really except it's before B. B is before C, C is before D, and so on. And then I ask the people to take the stories that we've estimated, using all the data plus everything else they know about the stories, and prioritize them into these columns so that stuff that should be done very first goes into A, next batch goes into B, C, D, E, F. And then level them so that there's a spectrum, an equal spectrum. Each column has an equal number of stuff. And then we look at the releases after that. Does this make sense? Like, do we want to do an alpha release, which is sort of friends and family, or beta release at some point, which is external people, so that we can get feedback and some kind of a milestone in there that we can aim for. So then, once we have that, we basically already have a prioritized backlog. It's just not very fully prioritized. The individual items there within each category have not yet been prioritized, but the overall picture starts becoming clear. So then we apply the last idea in this planning sequence. Prioritize the 80-20 Pareto principle. You know that? 80% of value is in 20% of the stuff. And in fact, usually 80% of the learning value is in the first 20% of stuff. Not necessarily business value. Let's come back to that. Right. We put the rest of the stuff in the backlog. We don't care about them for now. We're going to focus on stuff in the A column node. So this is, again, something that, as a coach, that I think is important. Let's focus the attention to the right things. We've already done maybe almost a full day of analysis and tried to understand these stories, plus any work we've done before. So if we say B, C, D, F, E, F, those are less important than A, we can safely put them aside and not invest further thinking to them. For now, we're going to focus all our attention to stuff in A. And if we survive A, that we find evidence and we can prove we can do that stuff, then of course it makes more sense to continue with the rest of the stuff. And we start digging into it in refinement and into the backlog. And if there's some of the items in the sort of the tail end of this arrow, this plan, if we never get to them or we just change our minds, we've not wasted more time on them. So if we measured, and I have done this in some projects where I actually write down the numbers, how many points of risk and how many points of value each story got, and I track them, how did we complete them over the first sprints? I usually don't care about the numbers once we have confidence that we're doing the right thing and we can do it, then other things become more important. But if I track the first sprints to demonstrate and visualize the amount of risk that goes down and the value that goes up, we see this kind of graph almost every single time. And so I talk about the mantra, risk down, value up, polish if we have any time, and ship. So that's the mantra for release planning in generally. That's the life cycle of a release. Now, next release, you do the same. You take a new scope of functionality, new targets, and you do repeat the same. Again, in this new scope, you want to get the risk down first, then get the value up, polish if you have time, and ship when it's appropriate. Now, those don't have to be fixed in time. So being agile, we don't necessarily need to have a deadline, a date. That can be a flexible thing. You finish when you think you're right. But a lot of times, especially if you do consulting and project-like work, and even in some product organizations, there are clear milestones when we want to ship for market reasons or for internal reasons. There can be date hopes, and they will affect the date when we ship as well, those things. So if we go back to the diagram that I showed you before, these quadrants, you can see the mantra here as well. Number one is the category of risk down. The second category is the value up. Polish is the third one. And the ship is, of course, a step going out of the whole diagram. So what are we really doing here? We are trying to answer a couple of absolutely critical questions that should be answered in a sequence over the first sprints in any endeavor, any project. The first question is, Can we reach the goal? Can we even do this? So this is when we deal with the high-risk musts and high-value musts, high-value, high-risk items. And specifically, I want to focus your attention to the risk. We want to prove the risk that we will not be tricked by the things that can come up. Now, depending on the project, it can vary very greatly what the risk is, what the uncertainty is that we need to sort out. Some projects, it's performance. In another, it could be security. In this Hello World example, it was feasibility, the technological choice. So whatever that big risk is, you want to build something that demonstrates your ability to actually do it. Once we know that we can do it, like in this project, after the first sprint, the Hello World, we already answered this question. Yes, we can do it. Now the next question is, can we do it within the commitments that we made and the targets that we would like to reach? We could not answer this question based on the Hello World. So we needed to do more research, more stories, more development, and finding out and delve more into the risk and uncertainties to be able to answer that one. So that took us time. And then once we have confidence that yes, we can reach the targets, the third one comes relevant. Can we do even better? So not just get satisfied with the second question, yes, we're going to do it, and then we just finish it like we planned. We should be asking ourselves, can we do it even better? Can we do it faster? Can we do more than we thought? Can we do it better in some way? Can we incorporate better ideas from customers in this work, whatever it is? And so, kind of an evolution, right? You see that. So, much of the rest, I'm going to give you examples of the various kinds of learning stories that we can use in our backlogs too, in various ways, depending on what we want to achieve with each one of them. We can use as means to incorporate these into the sprints and the Scrum flow in the backlog and the work the team is doing. So there's going to be 4 kinds of stories. And of course, it's not like I'm making things up. I mean, I'm just collecting ideas that people have been using, so there shouldn't really be all that much, but I may be giving some of you a little more context as to what these different types are and how to use them. So vertical slices. Spikes prototyping research. So first of all, vertical slice. This is an implementation, a concrete actual implementation within the product, but it's built in a very narrow scope, to the point that it actually isn't customer end user valuable usually. So we might do something like a happy day scenario only. So we don't care about error correction, we don't data validation. We just look at what's the simplest way just to get the flow of a feature or something in place, assuming, and when we test it, we only test with a happy day. We don't try extra failure points or bad data or something. If it falls and crashes because of that, then it does. We know it shouldn't even work. We don't expect it to. It could be that it only works on limited platforms like iOS or Android or on the computer, internet. Or it could be ugly. We don't care about the visual looks of the story. We just want to see the flow, how it feels, what customers say about the flow. And when we know and we have refined a nice version, a working version, then we make it nice and ship it. Or we could use simplified algorithms, manual operations underneath, whatever it is. Now, these are still, as I said, production quality. So definition of done applies to them. So whatever you define in your story as the boundaries of this very narrow slice, within those boundaries, it's production code and it works. No bugs in that code. And so whatever you've defined for yourself that you need to ship stuff. The reason we do this is not just technical, sometimes business risk, but when we try to do something very narrow, we force, and finish it, we force ourselves to face all the risk associated with completely delivering this one single slice. But also we can get feedback on it. That's another benefit from this. But all these techniques are about feedback. So this one is mostly about the technical risk. Forces us to face it. Instead of just speculating, okay, I think we can do the rest. Like testing is going to finish over the performance, whatever it is it. Now, this is good for low to medium uncertainty. Simply because a lot of times the effort to actually make production code, even if it's a narrow slice, is actually still significantly expensive compared to the other techniques that we could use. When I was writing that and reviewing, I realized, well, this case that I'm talking about, the hello world, is that as medium or small risk? No. So, but think about it, we invested a lot of money to prove it. It was high risk, but it was a very expensive experiment. 2 weeks of work for 7 Finns, plus a couple of people associated with the project. That's not a small amount of money. And if we had not been able to finish it, that money would have kind of been lost by the customer. So usually we don't want to do that big experiments, but we had to. So that's a special case about this story. And here's some examples of vertical slices written down on story cards. The first one there that you can see, that one, that's very much the second story we built in this. So once we got the hello world done, that's actually the second story we did. So the next question was that the product owner had given us, the customer had given us a specification. This is what we would like this system to look like. So we did have a spec. Remember, spec is not a specification, actually it's speculation, right? So we had a speculation document about the UI, what should it look like, maybe. And so one of the things that it showed us is that they would like to have this kind of a cover page for the website. So when the users ultimately come to the website, they want to see this layout because they want to show different kind of like news and updates and information, whatever they wanted, I don't remember. And then there was some like blog posts or whatever they wanted to share with the people. So they wanted to have this layout. Can we do it? We had never used this tool, remember? Now it has a view component that you can use, and so it should use, but how difficult is it to use? And so on, we wanted to try it out. So this story with lorem ipsum, so we didn't care about the content of the page, dynamics of the page and behavior, we just wanted to see if the layout works. So we made another story, expanded the view from a single, very simple one to this, what the customer wanted, and that was the second story. Can we do it? Check, we can. But there's other examples. Technology on the right, we have the technology constraint that we only do it on iOS. And then the simplified algorithm, we don't care about password recovery or necessarily even the security of the username and password. We just use a simple view to see how it feels. Then there's the third one, the middle one at the bottom is an example of, it's not actually a user story in the sense that, well, in some ways it's a vertical slice. Vertical slice doesn't have to be a user story. User stories tend to be and should be vertical slices, but vertical slices is any backlog item which can be taken from the backlog and done to 100% and working code. And so that is a working code. It can be put in production, and then we reflect on the data that we get from the test. And that's about happy day scenario. Okay, just examples. A second type of research story is the spike. What's different? This is again in code. This is in the product most of the times. Well, that's a definition of spike. It would be a prototype. We'll come to the prototype next when it's outside the product. This is in the product and often an experiment through the layers, testing some capability, but with a difference to the vertical slide that this is not production code. It's a branch maybe that we take off the main code base and we never merge. We use that information we gain from the experiment to make decision and then implement it again separately. This one is better to time box. So it's easy to take this kind of a spike too far. So when you manage and when you plan spikes, it's better to say, let's take, say, 4 hours and only spend 4 hours on this. So whatever we do, whatever we learn in that 4 hours, that's fine. That's all we're going to spend for now at least. And then we review the results of what we learn and decide what we're going to continue with. And this is, again, because we are investing less, it's good for medium to high uncertainty. I suppose we could have used the spike in this Hello World case. But the reason we went with a full user story or full vertical slice was because it wasn't just about using the tools, but it was all the integrations, the tooling, build automation, test automation, and those were significant elements in the confidence that we can use the techniques, because we were not willing to give up the Agile workflow that we had planned and wanted to use in this project. And some examples. Now, how do you write a spike? Well, there you can see an example. Now, I don't care about the user story format for this because it doesn't make any sense, because they are not user stories. We don't necessarily do anything that even a customer can see. We can do stuff in the back end or somewhere else in the code. We just use it in the code, and so we just write down what kind of an experiment we're running, what the spike is about, and then that feeds it into what we do. And remember, definition of done doesn't apply to this, so we can do whatever we like in the code because we're going to discard it anyways. The third type is prototyping. And again, the distinction between these types, this one is outside the code. So it could be technical, it could be code, but it certainly is not part of the, we're not using the product in any way as part of this. It's an application or test or experiment otherwise. And prototyping includes paper prototypes, obviously. So it could be non-technical stuff as well that we then incorporate in the decision we do. In another project, a simple example of a prototype, we did an application that was supposed to be in a mobile phone, and this was time when the stuff that I talk about wasn't like standard. I mean, stuff you can do this nowadays by standard, but back in the days, controlling a phone remotely was not standard. I mean, they didn't have the applications already in the systems. So this was 15, 16 years ago. And we didn't know. It was a new system to us, new architecture, well, new platform. And we didn't know if we can actually control it and video. For example, in order to control remotely, we need to be able to show video from the device over the internet to someone using a browser somewhere else. We didn't know if we can do that, how to do it, what the performance is. So we did a couple of hours, the team made a prototype, a simple application, whose only job was to take as many screenshots in the product, on the device as possible within a couple of seconds and see what's the average rate. A couple of hours, they ran the test. We got a number, 90 screenshots per second. So that's enough for a video and still leave enough performance on the device for us to actually implement controls and use the device, run some other application on the device. It's not what it is today, but it was good enough for that time. And so that allowed us to make decisions, continue with actual implementation of these features. Again, not used directly in the product. This time, again, I think we set up a time box, a couple of hours, so that we wouldn't start doing days on it. If we couldn't do it in 2 hours, then of course we would rethink possibly the whole strategy that we were using. Again, medium to high uncertainty, because you're not spending much time on this. And here's some examples. I don't think there's anything special about those. Have a quick look. Just very simple technical, some very simple questions that we need to find out. And I write them as a prototype to indicate the type of story, type of implementation we're looking for. That was the story that I mentioned you. The first one was that screenshot thing. And the last one, and of course this could be the lightweightest of all of these techniques, is simply doing research. Not any kind of an actual implementation that resembles or tests something in the system. It's simply just finding things out. Like sometimes you might have legal questions or business questions that don't need implementation from the team directly, but they might need to interface with somebody outside the team or outside the unit. Again, could be anything. A lot of times, I'm going to be clear. Of course, this is not bound by the DoD, right? It's obvious, right? So if we do research, we're not coding anything, so DoD doesn't apply. But what I recommend that you talk about is that how you're going to share the results. So if someone goes and does research, how are you going to come back to that data, that whatever they find, how is it shared within the team, so that then you can use the information. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it could be like a 15-minute review or something. This is often, and especially when we talk about refinement as an activity, this kind of stuff is really good refinement stuff. I mean, you can use spikes, you can use prototypes as part of refinement, but a lot of refinement can be just like this. And you write it down and do it sometime during a sprint as part of the refinement flow, so that in the next sprint review or next refinement meeting, you have the information available and you can apply that knowledge to your backlog and split things down or refine items otherwise in a better way. And here's a couple of simple examples. Again, what it could be. I mean, you can imagine a lot of scenarios in your projects where, or in your work where you could have written it down in the backlog as a clear item and then come back to it in the sprint review. So, is this different than a task? Oh. Did I do something? Oh well. So how is this different than just a task? I mean, these are all backlog items. Could we just write a task, talk to a customer, find this out instead? Sure we could. So why would we make a research task in the sense that we put in a backlog or in refinement explicitly, is that we explicitly come back to it. So we get record of that research that we've done. For some reason we want to do it. If we do it as part of refinement, just a single task, then it just, we don't save it, the information that we did this kind of research. The results, yes, but we don't care about the process. Sometimes you do want to save the information. And then that would be a case here. All right. To conclude, there's two types of value. Learning value is often the more important one in the early stages of whatever you do. Product value, user value comes once you've confirmed, remember the 3 questions, that you can do it and you can reach your goals. Then you worry about the business value. The mantra, risk down, value up, polish, ship, will help you remember these stages. And then 80-20, remember to focus not on everything, but focus your attention to a small number of items that contain large amounts of what you're interested in. Now, if that's learning value, then 80% of risk in 20% of stories. That's a category A in that model. And then if you focus on the business value, then of course 80% of business value in 20% of stories, that's the value up phase. So the same idea applies to both of these scenarios. So, thank you. How well did we do in terms of time? I think rather well. Not too many questions. Okay, fair enough. When are we supposed to end? 45 past? So we have 10 minutes.
We have 5-10 more minutes, so if you want to go through the questions, or perhaps discuss your impressions of Belgrade.
Okay. So the facilitator is strong in me, right? Okay, so what is the difference between vertical slice and a prototype? So vertical slice, remember, that's something that you actually use. It's part of the product. And so lorem ipsum, even though it's part of the product, we would not release that to a customer. That's a critical. We don't release it. Nobody needs that feature, or the lorem ipsum is there, but it's still production quality. Yes, can't ship, but it's potentially shippable. If we wanted to ship it. No, we don't. So so a prototype or even a spike, we would have to, if we decided to continue with that idea, we would have to come back to it and make it production quality. But if we do a vertical slice, it is already production quality. There are like the lorem ipsum, yes, we have to change that, but none of the code needs to be changed for that. None of the layout things needed to be changed for that. It was a done feature. What's the first one? So is it that I came out of there so I can actually see you? Is that related to it? Okay. I wanted to see you, so that's why I wasn't in the spotlight, and maybe it's a problem for someone taking a video, but this is a problem to me. Like, I want to see you, so that's why I'm here. Maybe the glasses would have helped me, but I'm not sure if I see you still. It's just a shine. Oh, well, never mind. Okay. There's some guesses. Probably good guesses. Let's see. I don't know the number, but it was a bigger number than that. Any other questions? Anything you want to shout out? I can hear you probably. Anyway,
it's a very silent audience.
I know, but maybe this wasn't such a mind-blowing experience. Maybe it was just more practical and close to the real life, whereas the other talks we've had today have been maybe bigger and more open-ended, and I don't know, maybe more important. But this is sort of daily work in the teams that allows you to get practical with the backlog. And it works rather well, to the point that I haven't really changed much of this basic principle in about 15 years. Of course, details change from one project to another. So thank you, everyone.
And I have a few questions for you before we all decide to leave the venue and, I don't know, go back to the office or go to the restaurant or do whatever.
See you there.
So question number one, and after that we will come to the mind-blowing thing. You've actually been quite a lot in Belgrade, right? Mm-hmm. So 9 times, if I remember right?
9 years. That's more times.
What are the impressions that you would like to share with other people?
First of all, a lot of things have happened in 9 years, so the city has changed in a very good, positive way. What attracted me and what I thought was very interesting about Belgrade, that it was a mix of everything. There was a lot of beautiful things, and there were ugly things. There were new stuff and shiny, and then there was old historical items. For Finn, we have 150 years of basic history, maybe 200 in a bit more older building. You got hundreds, if not thousands of years of history on some of the places. So that was attractive. And it was also an interesting mix of friendly, wonderful people, and then rude people. You go to a grocery store, and then there's a grumpy lady or man, and they don't, it's very grumpy. So it was a mix of everything. It was very interesting.
But it's a yes, do get to Belgrade, or...
Now, I've been around the rest of Serbia some. Belgrade is a bit of a different place than many other places, but, particularly Belgrade's been interesting. And then the mountains, I like them, and Novi Sad is a nice city, so.
Good, thanks for sharing that. So a mind-blowing fact that I would like to share with you, and with you. Yeah,
that was my question to you. Yes.
So there have been a total of, it's a 4-digit number, just so you know. Okay. So all the digits were like 3 digits, all the guesses were 3 digits, so you decide if you buy someone a drink.
So whoever got the highest number had the bravest answer, yes, beer or drinks is for you.
So it's a 4-digit number, 1,309 people.
That's a lot. I just realized it's not exactly people, it's certifications.
So it's even more people?
Because some people have taken both certifications. So there's some duplicates in the number, to be fair with you and honest with the number. But it's number of people who participated and experienced the training I've done. So that's a lot of people, I think.
I think it's a quite amazing number, yeah. Mind-blowing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Petri.
Thank you.
So we are officially done for today in this room, in this venue. We are meeting at 6:00 p.m. So in an hour and a half, Restaurant Reka, very close here, 10 minutes walk. So if you put it in the maps, it's very easy to get there. Food, drinks, everybody on their own, except for the people who are getting the drinks from our speakers, because they've been great in guessing games.
Yeah, I need the name.
We'll get to the name.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, 9 o'clock, Japanese 9 o'clock, like German 9 o'clock, we meet here in the room. And, you know, Serbian 8, which is 8:30, we meet outside there for coffee. That good? Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.